You know there's a problem when nearly every match in Football Manager starts to feel the same. Lately, FM24's tactics meta has gotten so stale that it's like everybody just downloaded it from the same website. Couldn't possibly be that. If you watched week one of the league, you probably noticed it yourself. Every opponent I faced ran some sort of variation of a flat front three. Literally every match, it was like, oh look, another 4-3-3 with three strikers up top. How surprising. And it's not just in the league, which, by the way, it's back live on Twitch tonight, 6 p.m. We'll have highlights here on YouTube in a couple of days. Watch any FM video or stream and you'll see the same tactics over and over again. And I'm as guilty of it as anybody else. And why is it happening? Why is everyone obsessed with the same formation and tactics? It is pretty easy to work out. They work. The current meta tactics in FM24 are so effective that not using them is like admitting defeat before you've even kicked off. When one tactical approach clearly outperforms everything else, of course everyone's going to use it, especially in a PvP setting with bragging rights on the line. And after 18 months of this game cycle, the community has absolutely perfected these approaches. We've collectively squeezed every drop of efficiency out of the match engine, and in the process, we might have squeezed some of the fun and variety out too. Let me give you some examples. We're going to keep using the league because it's fresh in my mind. If you've not watched it, it's an online competition with 20 Football Manager content creators. I'm one of them. It's super fun. But it did immediately become obvious that meta was going to be king in this competition because in week one, I swear every match I played was against the exact same shape. A flat front three in attack with loads of pressing, overlapping fullbacks. Some managers did have tiny tweaks like that try hard work the space who downloaded something unlike anything you'd see on an actual football pitch. But fundamentally, it was the same match over and over again. It didn't seem to matter who I was up against, whether they were near the top of the league or near the bottom. Everyone basically had some kind of version of the same tactic. You could swap out the club badges and the creator names and you wouldn't really notice the difference. And that, to me, seems bonkers because in real life, obviously football tactics vary widely, but in FM right now, there's basically one optimal way to play. And if you're not doing it, you're at a huge disadvantage. And this isn't me just getting my excuses in early for an inevitable mid-table finish in the league because I'm the one not doing this kind of thing. And it isn't just my personal feelings either. It's backed up by what you see in all flavours of competitive FM. Remember the FIFAe Football Manager World Cup from last year? The Indonesian team that won the whole thing did it using a ridiculously effective tactic. It was basically a 4-2-3-1 gegenpress setup with almost every player on an attack duty, all-out attack, high pressing, ultra aggressive, and guess what? It steamrolled everybody. In fact, that tactic became so notorious that within the league, it's actually banned. We're not allowed to use that or any close variations of that as part of our current online tournament. And that in itself is mad. A video game strategy was so dominant that as creators, we've basically had to say, nah, we can't really do that. It's going to spoil the fun. It's like banning a character in a fighting game for being too good. And it's not the kind of thing you expect to happen in Football Manager, but that's where we are. The tactic that won the world title was too powerful for our league's fairness. And trust me, that ban was justified. I've seen firsthand what that tactic can do. I used it myself when I did a charity stream for Autistica earlier this year. It was a one-season challenge where I had to manage Luton on a vanilla version of FM24. And with barely any transfers, I took that Luton team, which, by the way, is now in League One in real life. That's how rubbish they are. But I took them into the Champions League in one season. It's the kind of setup where you finish a match and the opponent has 0 shots on target because you just smothered them completely. It turns relegation battlers into world beaters. It's basically a plug and play cheat code. Pick it up, stick it on any half decent team, and you will overachieve. So it's no wonder everybody started downloading it and using it, because if you didn't, you get left behind. And I do want to clarify, I'm not calling that Indonesian team cheats. They developed the tactic through hundreds of hours of testing the match engine and worked out an edge, and fair play to them. They're world champions because of it. But they did break the game for everybody else. And also, to double clarify, I am calling Jack a cheat for copying their system. But I'm a monster too, because we didn't just stop at banning the 4-2-3-1 Indonesian tactic from the league. We've also had to ban custom set pieces of any kind in the most anti-Kev move ever in competitive gaming history. But even as the man who won 7 streamer showdowns off the back of big meaty men and corner routines, I do have to grudgingly admit that set piece routines are broken. For example, the meta tactic here is to park a giant 6'5" centre back at the near post, aim every corner at him and have everyone else drag the defenders away. The result, that centre back scores 20, 30, 40 goals a season just from headers from corners. And I'm not exaggerating, we've literally seen defenders outscoring Erling Haaland thanks to that corner routine. And it got to the point where if you weren't using those custom routines, you were missing out on a huge source of goals. And if you were using them, well, the game kind of descended into who can abuse corners more. See the network game from earlier this year, for an example, and some of those match highlights were just corners, taking it in turns, taking corners. And as much as I enjoyed it, because I was the one benefiting most from it, that's not football. That's exploiting a loophole in the match engine. So again, we collectively agreed for the league, no custom set pieces, because otherwise the league table would just be determined by who has the tallest centre-back and the cheekiest corner exploit. And Sports Interactive, if you are listening, that's a sign something's wrong, because if the community has to self-impose rules to make the game fair, then I suspect there might be some balancing issues in the game in general. And perhaps the most eye-opening example for me was again during the network game earlier this year. The idea was for me, Jack, Ben and Zealand to have a fun, friendly multiplayer game, each managing a different club in the same league. The whole point of the network game was the banter and the unpredictable chaos. Except it kind of stopped being fun when Jack decided to unleash his downloaded World Cup meta tactics on us. I'm talking the exact kind of all-out gegenpress, high line, exploit every edge tactic we were just talking about, and it definitely worked. His team was basically unbeatable, but it also absolutely sucked the fun out of the experience, and Jack knows it. We all knew it. He did manage to win the network game this time around, but at what cost? Because he'll now be forever known as a tactic downloading fraud. And in all seriousness, it did stop feeling like a friendly competition and more like sweating it out on the ranked ladder of an esports game. And it's one of the main reasons we stopped that save after just one season. The outcome was inevitable, and even the viewers noticed, with comments talking about how it wasn't as entertaining to watch one player dominate with an overpowered tactic. And I don't blame them, because it wasn't much fun to play in either, unless you were the one winning. And in case all of that comes across as a personal attack on Jack, I do just want to make clear that it absolutely is. He's a monster and he knows what he did. So how did we get here? How did Football Manager, a series that's all about creativity, strategy and freedom, end up with a one-size-fits-all tactical meta? There are a few reasons. Every year, the FM match engine has its quirks. Certain things it handles well and certain things it doesn't. In the last few FMs, the engine has over-awarded aggressive, high-press, high-line tactics. The classic gegenpress. High pressing, fast tempo, swarm your opponent. It's incredibly effective. So are tactics that push loads of players forward. We've basically figured out that the engine struggles to punish extreme attacking setups. You can often get away with leaving just 2 defenders back and throwing everybody else forward. In real life, a team that cavalier would get torn apart on the counter-attack, but in FM, the AI forwards rarely make you pay for it. The result? Attack, attack, attack is the meta. Why play a balanced 4-4-2 or a cautious counter-attacking 4-5-1 when you can play a 4-2-4 kamikaze and win 5-0 every week? Another example of engine bias? The set piece code has clearly got some holes in it, as we've seen with corners. Year after year, clever little nerds find the same exploit. Near post corners basically equal goals. And that's been around for as long as I've been doing content, probably as far back as like FM 13, FM 14. And it still crops up. It's a legacy issue in the game. So unless you set a house rule to not allow it, then people are going to use it because it's free goals. And don't forget, Football Manager has a huge community. You've got Reddit, forums, YouTube, sites like FM Scout, Sort It Out SI. The moment someone discovers an overpowered tactic or a trick, it spreads like wildfire. You've got creators like Nap, for instance, who releases sets of proven tactics every time there's a new patch. There are websites that literally rank tactics by win percentage. So as a player, if you want success and you don't care about cheesing the game, you've got loads of resources to find out an absolutely optimal system. And even if you do care about realism, once you know the meta exists, it's pretty hard to ignore it. I saw a comment recently where someone said something along the lines of they can't enjoy the game anymore because every tactic they make ends up unconsciously looking like a meta tactic. They try and do something unique, but know that ultimately a high press, short passing, high tempo system is so strong that you do tend to drift back to it because nobody likes losing. And I definitely feel that too. The knowledge is out there, and after a while, it seeps into your play style, whether you do it on purpose or not. We've essentially solved FM24's tactics, and once a game's solved, it does start to feel stale. And of course, we are now well into 2025, and FM24 has been out for a long time, longer than any other version of Football Manager in history. And many of us, as a result, have more hours on FM24 than any of the previous versions. And then, of course, we've got Sports Interactive's focus for the last few years on this move to Unity and the new game. And they even announced themselves that FM24 was the last of the old engine. So yeah, it was the best version of that version of FM they've ever done, but it did contain a lot of code and systems that haven't changed for years. And with all that extra time, hardcore players have just kept optimizing and optimizing and optimizing. Every exploit, every imbalance in the match engine, they've all been identified, they've all been amplified. And it's not usually this bad because when you're in a cycle of getting a new game every year, the new release does tend to change at least a couple of things, so it all becomes a little bit less noticeable. But when you've had 18 months of people hammering FM24, well, here we are. The problem is worse than it ever has been. And then we've got another factor of more people playing FM competitively. It's no longer just a single player experience, whether it's official tournaments, online leagues like ours, or just folk wanting to post their screenshots on Twitter or Reddit. When pride or prizes are on the line, people naturally gravitate to the most ruthlessly efficient tactics. We saw it in the network game where nobody wants to be the one sticking to a sentimental 4-4-2 and getting spanked 6-0 because the other guy is using the meta. And honestly, you can't blame them. If an exploit exists, competitors are going to use it. The downside is, collectively, it makes the whole scene much more one-dimensional. Every team ends up looking like 2011 Barcelona on steroids, which sounds fun at first, until you realise every single match is just two high presses colliding, and whoever abuses the engine slightly better wins. So, we've diagnosed the disease, but what's the cure? How do we get out of our stagnant meta where one tactic rules them all? I do have a few thoughts, and while I'm not a game developer, I'm just a handsome entertainer. These are changes I'd love to see from Sports Interactive moving forward. Number one, and we've talked about it a lot before, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much, but we do need to improve the match engine's balance. Sports Interactive need to patch the exploits and shore up the weaknesses in the game. If a certain tactic, like our famous 4-2-3-1, is basically unbeatable, the devs should be asking why and adjusting the code. Real football has no unbeatable tactic. Every approach has counters, and the FM match engine needs to reflect that. For instance, if everybody's playing a high press 4-3-3, the AI or the code or whatever you want to call it should throw more counter punches, long balls over the top to punish high lines, strikers peeling off to exploit the space, fatigue and injuries catching up to teams that are constantly pressing. Right now, those counters either don't happen enough or aren't effective enough. If we had a patch where suddenly playing three up front with fullbacks bombing on was risky again, as it should be, managers would be forced to diversify their tactics. SI have to essentially nerf the dominant strategies. And this isn't unprecedented. They have patched set-piece exploits in the past, and they've also tweaked match engine behaviours as well. Playing single-player FM shouldn't feel like shooting fish in a barrel because the AI never adapts. Ideally, AI managers should recognize when a human player is using a meta tactic and try something unexpected to counter it. For example, if I'm always using a 4-2-4 ultra attacking system, a smart AI should be doing a very defensive formation, sitting deep, frustrating me and hitting me on the counter, like they would in real life. Or if I keep scoring from the same corner routine, the AI should eventually stick an extra defender on my big man or change the way they're doing their marking. Right now, the AI is pretty static. It plays how it plays, regardless of what the meta is. And that makes the meta remain effective. If the game AI started shutting down the meta tactics, then players would naturally have to adapt and find new solutions. In other words, force the meta to evolve. I'd love it if FM had more frequent balance updates during its game cycle. I get that it's not a competitive esports title in the traditional sense, but we are clearly seeing a PvP community emerge over the last few years. Whether it's the league that's going on currently, the Streamer Showdown, or the network game, or the FIFAe World Cup that we had last year that billed itself as an esports tournament. But even for casual play, variety keeps things fun. Maybe Sports Interactive could introduce mid-cycle tweaks, say an update that slightly reduces the accuracy of near-post headers or improves defenders' positioning against certain formations. Even small tweaks like that can massively shake up the optimal tactics. Another idea? A more dynamic match engine that changes a bit year to year within a single save. Because in real football, trends shift. One season it might be a 3 at the back that's all the rage. Next season, inverted wing backs, etc, etc. And if FM could simulate some of that tactical trend evolution within saves, it might naturally break up monotony. And I know that one's a big ask, but wouldn't it be cool? A long-term hope I have for FM is to make success less about finding the one magic tactic and more about squad building, adaptability, and context. FM is a management game, yet right now it usually just boils down to find the winning tactic and then spam it. In reality, even the best managers have to tweak and adjust tactics for different matches, different players, and the game should push us to have to do that too. Maybe that means programming the engine so that no single tactic can dominate every opponent. You'll have great games and then some games where you need a plan B. If a tactic is super attacking, perhaps certain AI styles should just absolutely blunt it, forcing you to try something else. Essentially, what we're looking for is rock, paper, scissors, but in a deep football way. Football Pokemon. You never want just one meta, but you want several viable approaches that all counter each other. Because that way, even in multiplayer, you'd have variety. Because if Jack pulls out an all-out attacking gegenpress that keeps beating my standard 4-3-3, maybe I could then try a strikerless or a back 5 to counter him. But there's no point doing that right now, because at the moment, it feels like we're playing rock, paper, scissors, but rock beats everything, so everyone just picks rock. And that needs to change. And while we wait for Sports Interactive and a new version of the game, there is also an onus on us as a community. If you find Football Manager is getting boring because you're using the meta tactics, maybe challenge yourself to break away from them. Try a save where you ban yourself from using the popular formations or the overpowered instructions, like we're doing in the league. Maybe challenge yourself to an experiment where you're not allowed to use gegenpress or you're only allowed to use unusual formations. Kind of like forcing yourself to play it on hard mode. And at the end of the day, we all play Football Manager because we love football and the endless possibilities it offers. It's a sandbox where we should be able to test out wild ideas, live out our football fantasies, and have a unique story every save. But a dominant meta completely undermines that. FM's tactics meta is stuck right now, but it doesn't have to stay that way. I hope that when we eventually get a new game, FM 26, maybe? Sports Interactive will be looking to shake things up. We want a game where multiple tactics can shine, where you can win playing your way and not just the correct way. I don't think that's too much to ask, is it? So thanks for watching, folks. If you've enjoyed this tactical deep dive, or even if you just have your own experiences with the FM meta that you want to share, let me know about them down in the comments section. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I've got more FM content, the Pentagon experiments coming your way, and I promise to keep them at least 30% meta exploit 3. Maybe 20%. At least I won't use the corner tactic every game. Toodle pip, folks.